Hi, this is Beth Gilligan. I'm Director of Development and Marketing at the Coolidge Corner Theatre. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's special Q&A for Through the Night. If you haven't yet seen the film, it is playing in our virtual screening room. You can access it at coolidge.org. Obviously, our doors have been closed for quite a while now. So every time you rent a film in our virtual screening room, it supports our nonprofit organization. But better yet, you get to see, in this case, a really incredible, urgent, timely, wonderful film. We are so thrilled to have tonight's panel, but just a few remarks before we get to that. Just want to take a moment. Today, of course, is Martin Luther King Jr. Day to celebrate and recognize his life and legacy, and also to recognize the indigenous land on which our organizations operate as an expression of gratitude, appreciation, and awareness. The Coolidge Corner Theatre is in Brookline, Neighborhood Villages is in Boston, and both are on the traditional lands of Massachusetts and Pawtucket. We'd also like to acknowledge that digital technology by which we are coming together today is not available in many indigenous communities. I'd like to thank our neighborhood, our community partners for this event, particularly Neighborhood Villages. They've been an amazing co-presenter and have worked to do outreach to the many organizations that are helping support this film. They are East Boston Social Center, Ellis, Epiphany School, March Like a Mother for Black Lives, Project Hope, Vital Village, and YW Boston. I hope I got all those, Lauren. If I didn't, feel free to chime in later.
And Impact.
I'll drop those names into the chat. They're all incredible nonprofit organizations doing great work in the community. So in case people want to check them out further. Thanks to Aaron Owens and Nicole Docta for help organizing this event. And thank you to our panelists today. So we have a terrific lineup. We have Loira Limbal, the filmmaker. We have Patrick and Deloris, who many will know as Nunu from the film Hogan, who are featured in the film. We have Lauren Kennedy, who is the co-founder of Neighborhood Villages. And to moderate, we have Boston Globe columnist Jeneé Osterheldt. So thank you all, and I'll hand things off to Jeneé.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our discussion tonight. Please feel free to ask questions. I want to start off with asking Loira what inspired this film.
Yes, well, good evening, everyone. So the film was inspired actually by an article that I read in which Nunu and Patrick's daycare was featured. I read this article about 6 years ago, and the article was sort of looking at the fact that in the United States, people increasingly have to work more than one job to make ends meet, and that oftentimes those jobs require overnight hours or irregular hours, schedules that will change from day to day or week to week. And then it posed the question of, given that reality, who then looks after people's children? And they profiled these tots and also shared a bit of the stories of a few of the mothers whose children attend these tots. And when I read the article, I was really captivated by the stories and by sort of the world that I was imagining as I was reading, because my mother worked the night shifts while we were coming up. She worked a low-wage job. She was a home health aide, made minimum wage, and raised 4 kids in New York City, as a single parent on minimum wage. And so it just felt like I was reading the story of other people, but at the same time, it was like reading my mother's own story and my own story as a child. And I myself now am a single working mother. And so this is this kind of universe that I've known really intimately my whole life, but that I rarely see depicted or portrayed anywhere. And so as a filmmaker, I was like, oh my God, this would be an amazing film. So that's really where the idea came from.
And it is an amazing film. And I told you this already, but it really was so beautiful to see, and such a universal story, I feel like, for so many Black and brown and lower middle class families. My parents couldn't afford childcare. I was a latchkey kid starting in kindergarten. So when I saw it, I also thought about my parents and how, especially when Diana's mother was she's working 3 jobs and trying to just find the one job to take care of daycare, and thinking about having to leave her at home. And my heart just broke for her, especially when she kept talking about, when the daughter, Diana, kept talking about how she didn't want to leave Nunu and that they were her family, and just the prospect of aging out of care. Lauren, I was looking at Massachusetts, and we're the second most expensive state for daycare in the entire country. We're only behind Washington, D.C. Our childcare is like state college tuition.
Wow.
Can you talk a little bit about that, especially on Martin Luther King Day, when he fought so hard for economic justice and that was part of his platform? Can you talk about kind of what that says about us when people cannot afford? No, and these, sometimes it's people who, it's not always people like Diana's mother who had 3 jobs. I know people who make $60,000 to $80,000 a year in places like Kansas City, and one of the partners has to give up, normally the mother. Like my friends had twins, and Tiffany gave up her job to take care of the twins because it would have been her whole salary, put them in daycare. So can we talk a little bit about what that says about us and our values?
Yeah, and I want to start on sort of the uplifting note, right? That it is people like Nunu, like Patrick, who play this incredibly invaluable role in the lives of families. And if COVID has shown us one thing, right, it is the foundation upon which everything else is built. When the pandemic set in and so many childcare and early learning programs had to close, immediately, right, we sort of saw this scrambling for, well, how will people go to work? How will we get our economy back online? And really laying bare what we've conveniently, right, chosen to ignore, which is at the heart of this, is who is partnering with families to help raise their children, given that for most families, if it's a dual parent household, both parents have to work in order to make it work in America today. So I want to start there because the landscape is grim. And it's hard. It's so much harder now in sort of the midst of this pandemic. So, as you mentioned, $20,000 is the average for childcare in Massachusetts, but that's for one child. And that's the average across the state. So if you're in Boston, you're looking at closer to $30,000 for an infant, for one infant. And if you have more than one child, right, then that average quickly bumps up to closer to like $35,000 a year for a family for 1 year. And so in the best of times, we have locked out so many families from quality childcare and early learning. That's the other piece of this, right, is it's dual. It's not just, childcare so mom and dad can go to work. It's early education. It's how we set these children up to thrive. Nunu and Patrick, the beautiful footage of all you are investing in those children, and I'm going to butcher it, so I'll just say one of it, right? The end of it, you're saying these are the children who will go on to be the presidents, right? Will go on to do these incredible things because we invest in them in these early years. And yet, what do we have in front of us? A tuition that locks families out, but at the same time does not come anywhere close to covering the cost of what it is to be a childcare provider and offer childcare in a manner that pays educators more than what they're making right now, which is minimum wage or just a little bit above minimum wage, to invest in your programming, to invest in your facilities, right? As a family childcare provider, your home is your place of business. And so what we've done in this country is really pit the family against the provider, which is to say $20,000 is a huge amount for a family, but it's only just enough to help a childcare provider get by. And so what is it going to take to finally value the role that childcare and early education plays, and value the role of the childcare and early educator provider so that we can get both? A system that supports families, is affordable for families, but also invests in the, again, invaluable people like Nunu, like Patrick, who are helping us raise our children and make sure that they themselves are taken care of, that they have a wage, right, commensurate with their value in society, that they have access to health benefits, that they have access really to everything that we give our K-12 educators in recognition of the public good that they are providing to society. That's what we need to do, because in this landscape right now, everybody's losing. Families are losing, childcare providers are losing, and we have got to forge a new way forward. I think what is so powerful about this film is it is putting front and center the interconnectedness between the family and the provider and the mutual love that you have for each other. And so how do we come together and fight for something better?
Well, and I thought it did such a good job of showing the mutual love between the family and the provider, but also the sacrifices that everyone's making, that the family's making, that Nunu and Patrick are making. Like, there's so much collective work and sacrifice and love, and also grief happening all at the same time, and everyone's sharing it. And Nunu and Patrick, like everyone has already said, you guys are incredibly inspiring. And I think about especially Black women in communities all over the country for generations have kind of taken on these caretaker roles, these roles of like doing it all, and how on one hand it's part of what we've always done, and on the other hand how it leaves us in a position of being kind of the most overworked, undervalued, and undertaken care of people who continue to just open their chest and pour out for everyone. And, you know, I was so gutted when you went to the hospital in the film. It was like the curveball that I don't know if other people saw. I just didn't see it coming. And then when it happened, I was like, oh my God, she's gonna be at work again. It's like I just knew instinctively you were gonna show up for the kids again. How are you taking care of yourself, and what keeps you coming back every day?
That's really nice, but thank you very much. But it's funny because my back went out a couple of days ago, and it was out for like 4 days. And Patrick is, you know, bringing me tea and stuff, and I keep hearing the kids downstairs, and it's like, I don't care if I'm bending over like I'm looking for a quarter on the floor. I hear all this fun and laughter and stuff going on downstairs, and I wanted to be downstairs with my children. So if you want to know the truth, the way I take care of myself is through my kids, because what the kids are doing and the laughter, and even I was missing for the 3 days, and I come downstairs and they come around me and they go, oh, Nunu, we miss you. We love you. So that's the care right there. You know, as I couldn't see myself not being here for them. I just couldn't. So that's my care.
Patrick, what do you love about this work? The kids love you. It's very clear in the film.
When they go home. No, this is our life. I mean, we've been doing it, and even before, when I was, 9, 10, my younger brother and I used to watch, we lived in the projects, and we used to watch Neighborhood Children. You know, my mother was, I guess back then, they called it babysitting back then. And my brother and I had a little side business at 8, 9, 10 years old, watching Neighborhood Children. So it's something that's just, God-given strength, wisdom. We've been so used to it, and we enjoy it. We love kids. We have a wonderful time. I mean, I had worked 18 years at a bank, and this is light years ahead of it. We just enjoy it, watching the kids grow up, when they first walk, and when they first start to talk. And, unfortunately, the parents don't see that because they do have to work. They have to provide. So, but we are sort of the ears and eyes that we can report back to them. Now we can videotape it. I take a lot of pictures. So they sort of don't miss out, because through us, they see their children growing up. But I mean, it's something that we enjoy, and we're going to continue to do it.
And just like his mother, I'm sorry, but just like his mother and brother, my mom was the same way. She was the neighborhood person that fed all the children. And when I was a little girl, I did childcare and everything. So it's something that we've both been in doing all our lives.
Well, we're lucky to have you. I know we've talked a little bit about the financial strain that this puts on everybody, on the parents, on the providers. This new administration, we're ahead of the inauguration, and this new administration is calling for an additional $15 billion in childcare and development. How would you like to see childcare and early education aid change or distribute? Like, how do you think, as people who are in it, how do you think that this should work, or how would it better serve everybody?
I was listening to something on television with President Biden, and he was saying that he's going to raise the wages up to $15 an hour. And I'm looking at Patrick. I'm like, there's nowhere in the world me and you, daycare would just lose out, because we only make $7.35 an hour. How can we give our workers $15 an hour when we're not making that? So that means that we have to cut people out. And I have wonderful people working for me that's been working with me for years and years. And I definitely don't want to lose them or anything like that. And me and Patrick, we can't do it alone. That means we'll be cutting down on children. We'll be cutting out on people. In order for them to do that, they have to raise us too, so we can pay the people that's working for us. And great that they're giving the parents $15 an hour. That's wonderful, because some parents ain't making that much. But honestly, $15 is not enough for parents. Their rent is $2,000 to $1,800 for a one-bedroom apartment. $2,000 for a two-bedroom apartment. 15 is still not enough, but it's a start, I guess. But they need to raise us too. They forget about us. They raise other people, but they won't raise daycare.
Lauren, what do you think that we should be talking about more as we further this conversation on childcare for everyone, for the families and the providers, and for the education aspect of it?
I think we need to be talking about it as what it is, which is it's a public good. It's what K-12 is, right? It is investing in ourselves. It's investing in our children. It's investing in our parents and our families. And I'm sorry, I forgot to say this when you talked about economic justice. If you have childcare, is whether you can get into the workforce, how you succeed in the workforce, right? We just lost another 100 and something thousand jobs in December alone. 100% were women.
Women, all women, and disproportionately women of color.
So economic justice demands that we have universal, affordable childcare. But to Nunu's point, it's not just about it being affordable. It's about how do we make it a public good for everybody involved. And so, to pull out my soapbox and stand on it, is we have to put an immense amount of public dollars behind it, because you can't ask a childcare provider to pay their staff more if they don't have more money coming in. And we cannot ask parents to pay more because they already can't afford it. Right. So what do we need to do is say, here's what we believe is affordable based on your household income. That's all you'll pay. Knowing that that's not enough for the provider, public money needs to come in and make up the difference so that the entire system is lifted up, so that Nunu and Patrick have the income coming in that they need to run their incredible, wonderful business and be able to make a livelihood of it, right? You deserve to be on stable financial footing. You are running a business. You are contributing to a public good, in addition to the educators that you hire, right? Who are professionals who play a valuable role in society. The way that we have failed to recognize it is to push it all onto a family and to treat childcare as a small business. We have no childcare system. We have a market of small businesses who are struggling, right? To make do. And so a public good means we put public dollars behind it. And that's what I want to see. And sort of not just, I think the Biden plan is phenomenal, but what's the moonshot is build a true infrastructure around it. Right. Build, sort of the K-12 around it, make it one big education system, right? And if you are asking parents to pay into it, then make it very affordable and understand that society's role to step in and pay for the rest, the way that we all pay for K-12, to lift up the children and families of our country.
Loya, what did you, for me, I don't know about for you, but for me, like when I'm making certain pieces of art and writing stories and reporting stories, some things just change me during the process. And this film was so phenomenal. I was like, I know this had to shift something in her spirit. How did this change you or grow you or shift you?
Oh, that's a great question, and thank you for the kind words. I mean, this has been a really transformational journey on a lot of levels. I think for me, one thing is that my own imagination around what I want for us, you know, what I want for our communities has expanded, and I feel like less willing to accept the things that elected officials tell us about what's possible or impossible. Because when I, you know, spending the time that we did at Nunu and Patrick's daycare, you know, I saw them care for, and this is like year in and year out, right? I saw them care for children from all different kinds of families with all different kinds of talents and skills, needs, you know, issues, right? And you have families that are coming from just a diversity of lived experiences, right? Not even to say anything about diversity of socioeconomic statuses. Like, yes, you have Marisol, who's working three low wage jobs, but you have Shanona, who's a pediatric ER nurse, right? So you have folks that span the socioeconomic spectrum, different, you know, configurations of family, you know, 2-parent households, 1-parent household, grandma or auntie or guardian or whatever. Anyway, all that to say that you have this incredibly diverse, you know, community of need and an incredibly complex network of care. And that is possible. So to me, it's like, you know, their daycare is a microcosm. Like, it's possible to take care of people, you know, and it's possible to take care of people. They've told us that it isn't, right? They keep making it sound like it's so hard and it's so impossible and it's so this and so that. But it's like, I refuse to believe them, you know, because Nunu and Patrick are the living example that it actually is possible. And that while they've been, you know, in their offices or whatever, talking about why they can't do it, here are Patrick and Nunu doing it, like literally being the safety net for an entire community over multiple generations. So my imagination, you know, around all of that has shifted, and also like my willingness to believe you know, their party lines, if you will, has decreased tremendously. And I think on a more personal level, I'm really proud of the fact that the film is a very subtle film. It's a very, it's quiet in some ways. You know, obviously it does talk about, you know, I think it points out the cruelty of our economy and how capitalism works in the US. You know, you have people that are working themselves to the bone, right? Doing everything right, quote unquote, right? Like doing everything that society tells you to do, and still it's impossible. You know, it's incredibly hard. And so it's like, well, that then means that what we're being told to do, you know, that it's actually a setup, you know, and that while it does that, at the same time, it does center the love and the care and the tenderness that is so present at these tots, but that it's also like was very present in my life, you know. Again, like going back to my mother's story, we struggled financially, you know, we had lots of financial issues, and there was, you know, we grew up in poverty in the South Bronx. And at the same time, there was such an abundance of love and care and tenderness in my life when I look back on that. for me, it was important for us to, and when I say us, I'm talking about Black folks, brown folks, to see ourselves doing that, right? Like generating and creating and cultivating all this love and care and tenderness, even with everything that we're up against, that we still do this, and that's, I think in some ways we're like magical and we have superpowers. And I wanted us to see that in ourselves, and I think in some ways I started to see some of that in myself through working on the film, as well.
It's what I call the beautiful resistance. It's the soft parts that we still preserve despite all the hardness around us. And to your point, it's a microcosm of the possibilities of collective care, of hope, of community. And it's also a microcosm of what's broken, like how the entire system is built for capitalism and supremacy, which is all tied together. And it keeps people grinding to the point of restlessness, where there's just no rest. There's no rest, and you're just giving. The entire pandemic, I've been buying tulips, and I keep looking at these tulips, and it's like they grow and they curve and bend towards the light, and it's really beautiful how they dance. But then they bloom right open and give you their all, and then the petals just fall right off and turn into dust almost. And it's made me think a lot about how we love at until we can't, and we just keep going. We just keep going, despite all the things all the hurdles we have to jump, all the things that are against us. We just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep reaching for the light, and just open up to capacity. And I want to be like a different kind of flower. Like I want to be like a different kind of flower. When I was watching the film, I was looking at Nunu and looking at all of these mothers just working so hard and still loving everybody and showing up. And then I was looking at Diana and watching her help Nunu and just, try to do good in school. And she went from being shy to now she has friends. And I was just like seeing her kind of learn those same traits of just lovingness, like loving kindness. And I guess I want to ask how you think we can, like, yes, we need to love each other like this, and we need to give, but how can we make sure we're just saving a little for ourselves and taking those breaks and rest? Like, I want to see Nunu on a beach somewhere for a week. How can we just take a little bit of it for ourselves?
I honestly, I couldn't tell you. I'm just so used to working. I've been doing it ever since I was a little kid. I'm just so used to working. And if I get a day, that's like having a year, I'm happy that I have my husband. He's the sunshine of my life with my kids and my grandkids. That's a blessing right there by itself. I already think that God gave me the world when he walked into my life. He's been like the greatest husband. And I know women say that, but it's the truth. And my children are wonderful and my grandbabies are my heart. So, but to say, how do I take some time to myself? If I could sit down and have a cup of tea, that's time to myself. Other than that, I couldn't answer that question. I really can't.
Loya, do you have anything to add?
I do. I think, I feel like my mother has been telling me recently, my mother had COVID in April and she was, in the ICU, and it was pretty horrible. It was a nightmare. This was like when New York City the hospitals were, a mess, and you saw those videos of doctors and nurses crying, and so we got caught up in that, and So in some ways, I think like I faced one of my biggest fears, right? Like losing my mother in the midst of this nightmare. And we've been talking a lot, so she survived, thankfully, and she's doing well. And we're like all now together, and my mother and, me and my kids. And so we've been talking a lot, like we'll have coffee in the morning together. And she's been telling me, she'll like make me get up in the morning to like go out for a walk before I start the work day, and she'll be like, you exercise, or, if you downloaded that meditation app, do that, or, go out and just have, some alone time. And recently she said to me, which really broke my heart, she said, I'm telling you to do all these things because I don't want you to end up like me, where I'm still fairly young. She's only in her 60s, but her health is really, deteriorated. And so her reflection is that she didn't keep anything for herself. She used to work a 12, hour shift. Sometimes she would work 14 hours. It was a night shift, 4 kids by herself, so it was like work and the kids, work and the kids, work and the kids. And she never took time to herself. And so even though she's technically young, she has, all the things, right? Like diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, this, that, the third, that then made her really vulnerable, right? To COVID, and to all these things. And so she's been sort of telling me that, but it was like hard for me to hear my mom say, like, I don't want you to end up like me. Because in my mind, my mom is like the most
Right.
grandiose thing in the world. So I'm like, Mom, what are you talking about? Like, look at what you've done, but she's like, no, yes, I did all those things. You all went to college. I put, I raised y'all are, good, decent people. I'm proud of that. And when I look back, I'm like, I should have kept something for myself, made some room for myself, and so that's something that I'm also trying to, figure out, because I am a little bit of a workaholic, and then I'm a single mom too, so it's not easy to prioritize yourself when that's, when you're wired a certain way, and you have kids, and but I'm trying to learn. And my mother's in my ear like constantly every morning when we having our coffee.
My mother died at 61, and all I can say is listen to your mother and grab those moments. Definitely grab those moments. I do want to talk a little bit about COVID, as we are still in the midst of this pandemic. Nunu and Patrick, how has this changed the way you do things at daycare and just impacted these tots period?
I'm gonna let him talk because I've been running my mouth the whole time.
When she talks about me, I don't say anything. She's doing fine. For most childcare providers, not much has changed in terms of we sanitize the linens, the bed linens and toys every day, no matter what, even before, from day one when we opened up, 33, 34 years ago. We clean. She's a clean freak. So, everything is cleaned every day, swept every day. The kids don't, share mattresses and things like that, the pads. So in terms of that, not much has changed. We wash our hands and everything. In terms of making sure that the kids, with the temperature, that's something definitely new. Taking the temperature and stuff every day, doing that, and recording that, making sure no one has a temperature and things like that. Stressing definitely with the families, if your child is sick, you have to keep them home. It's a hardship. People have to go to work and things like that. But, one child can affect the whole daycare, just like at school. It can affect the whole school. So, parents have to bear that burden as well.
We lost a lot of kids. We lost a lot of kids.
Yeah, and yeah, we definitely lost families due to the pandemic that their job just wiped out whole departments and things like that. So it definitely has taken that effect. And and then on the good side of that, we've managed to bring in new families as well. So it's been both a challenge, but it's something that we're up for, we can handle, and we'll continue to do it because we've been open since the pandemic hit, and thank God everyone's been okay.
And then we have an audience question for Nunu and Patrick about how we can ensure care providers have a voice in the community, a voice at the table when it comes to how the childcare system works, and just kind of, as Nunu was talking earlier, like looking out for the provider the way everyone else gets looked out for. Do you feel like you have a voice at the table? And do you have any ideas on how to better be heard?
We do have a voice, not as big as enough voice as we want. New York has a provider union, a child care provider union, a voice of organized independent child care educators, back in from 2007. So we do have a voice, but it needs to be a bigger voice, especially on the federal and state levels. But sometimes you can have the biggest voice in the world, but if the ears that are receiving what you're saying isn't open to it, it's just falling on deaf ears. But again, you just keep on pounding and talking and yelling and screaming away. But again, thankfully for New York, we definitely have a child care provider union that we do sit at the table, but again, not as often as we need to be, especially when policies and regulations are being created. That's when we really need to be there, because we know what works and what won't work. A lot of times people that are making these policies and regulations, not all the time, but a lot of times they don't have their kids in daycare. They have someone that maybe come to their home, or even if they do have children. So that's one of the things definitely we need to be, is when they're in the planning stages, not after they have the policy down and say, okay, here's a 90-day period. What do you think about it? No, we should be there as it's being created. So we can say, okay, yeah, this works, this doesn't work. Not to make it easy for us, but make it better for everybody all around.
And the parents. You need the provider and the parent, because the parent can tell them what they need and what works for them. It shouldn't just be them, passing all the laws and stuff, and then, like Patrick said, it get passed down to us later on. And I think if parents start to reach out to to all the lawmakers and stuff, if parents reach out, if providers start to reach out, if we open our mouths a little bit more, we send more letters up, and we say a few more, we just get together and turn this into something, I think we can end up doing things, because jobs are not going to work without the providers, and jobs are not going to work without the parents. So it's really, we have the power, we just got to know how to use it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can I say something on that too? I think the like caregiving in the United States, because it's seen as like women's work, again in air quotes, and I say that very sarcastically, and because the majority of the women that do the work are, again, women of color, it's been this, part of our universe that has been just sort of made invisible and been cast to the side and been diminished, and we've taken it for granted, right? Like that these women are going to always be there and provide this work, in the shadows, underpaid, overworked, and these sorts of things. And, I think now we have, with the pandemic, we have this language of essential worker, right? Where we now know that actually, like, the people that you really, really need are a childcare provider, are, the woman who works at your supermarket, or at your local pharmacy so that you can go in and get your thermometer. It's the janitors, right? It's all these people that we have treated as if they're disposable, really, for forever and forevermore. And then now it turns out that these are the people that actually, like, when it all falls apart, these are the people that do the work that's the most essential. And so, there's a couple things to that with me. For me, it's like, well, now we know that. So, like, we just have to keep drilling that down. Like, it's not just nurses and doctors that are essential. There's all these other folks, right, that we're still leaving out of the equation. And so just making sure that that stays front and center. And that also, not only are these folks not disposable, they are essential, they are critical, and they're actually experts. They do the work that is most critical and have been doing it under really difficult, conditions and circumstances. So they are the experts. We need to sort of collectively shift our imaginations around what leaders look like and what leadership looks like. We think of leaders as elected officials or academic scholars, or the pundits that are on like MSNBC and whatever. Like, in our heads, those are, we call them leaders or thought leaders or whatever. And yes, they're important. I'm not, I don't mean to diminish their work, but the people that are doing the work, right, on the front lines are literal experts. And so, again, if you're trying to if you're trying to fix or find solutions to a system that is unjust, that is not working for anyone, why don't you bring in the people that have been providing all the services and meeting everyone's needs, right? In the midst of all the brokenness of everything. Those are that. So, so it's like, not only do they need to be paid more, not only do they need to be valued more, they need to be front and center in our, kind of collective imagination and mainstream. And then we need to see them as the leaders and the experts.
It's very much about seeing them, period. Like, how we're taught. My mother was a restaurant worker. My father literally still works at a grocery store to this day. And I wrote about him at the beginning of the pandemic because early in the pandemic, all of the framing was aggrandizing doctors and nurses who very much deserve love and respect. But I was frustrated because the grocery store workers and the daycare workers and all of these other people, the janitors, the mailmen, they weren't getting the parades of flags, the thank you signs, and all of this stuff. And I was just like, my dad is literally risking his life stocking toilet paper that people keep buying up that they don't need, and he's getting run over like at the grocery store, and he is 60. So it's a lot to process. And I think, there's this attitude, to your point, about gendered work. So it's like, if you are a care provider, then that's women's work, and it's specifically Black and Brown women's work when we look at the historical context of this country and how this country was built. So there's this dismissal of it. And it's like, oh, well, this is just what you're supposed to do. I also think it's why women are disproportionately losing their jobs during the pandemic, because it's like, oh, just stay home. So it's a shift of values. It's not even just like who we see and lead. It's like, we need to, the pandemic has exposed every broken aspect of a severely broken system. And sometimes I struggle with calling it broken because it was kind of designed to be how it is. So it's really just exposed how we need to rebuild every last facet of it. And the care of each other and the caring of our children, who are our future,
right,
is the most essential thing of all. Lauren, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted so tagging on to this, incredible kind of important aspect of visibility and value, and then tying that to, okay, now what does it mean to walk the walk? And I think one thing, you sort of mentioned, what is it like to operate in the space in COVID? And also this, okay, well, we've never really done this before, so surely we can't do it, when in fact, definitely we can. But it takes visibility and value, and then walking the walk. And just one example I want to give is, here in Massachusetts, our childcare providers have been at work since the early days of the pandemic. Our after-school providers have been at work. And for a good chunk of the semester, they have been in person providing children with safe places to learn, while schools here remain remote. And what we saw recently was the state deciding to roll out a free and comprehensive and coordinated COVID-19 testing protocol to enable K-12 teachers to be tested weekly, staff and students. And early educators and after-school providers were completely left out.
Right.
And I mean, really sort of this signal sent, which is despite our lip service to essential workers, even if it took a while to get, childcare on that list, but just sort of rendered invisible. Not just, right, on account of the devaluing of this work, but also a statement, frankly, of like whose lives matter and whose don't. Because what is COVID-19 testing? It's an application of a public health measure meant to make sure that your chances of getting sick are minimized, that your children, your families, and your communities. So that is sort of one place I think that here in Massachusetts anyway, is a real opportunity to sort of stand up and say, here's something we can do in the here and now while we wait for sort of the big change, is say our workforce is essential. Our workforce is predominantly women of color. And so if we are going to profess that Black lives matter, if we are going to profess that the lives of Black and brown women matter, then we need to follow that up with the same level of investment in this workforce as any other aspect of our education system. And so I just put that out there as sort of a very concrete example of how we can render something visible, how we can signal that we value it, and then how we can show that this is not impossible. It just takes political will. It takes operations and logistics. It takes putting, right, the childcare and after-school provider at the table to tell you if those operations and logistics plans will actually work. And lo and behold, we will be able to do this, and we will be protecting lives while we do it.
Energy. Stephanie Madsen says everybody's amazing and would like to know, are there any other solutions to the financial challenges around early childcare that any of you imagine that we haven't discussed already?
I mean, I would say, because we get that question a lot, I think that the solutions, the issues are, it's a lot of different intersecting issues, right? So I would say part of the solution is not to think of childcare as some sort of isolated thing, because again, I think, we even faced this with the film, in the early days of the release of the film, I had people be a little dismissive, and and it was kind of like, they were like, oh, well, I don't really know who the audience is for that, or, and then, you kind of later in conversation ask them, well, are you a parent? No, I'm not a parent. So, the thinking was that this only mattered if you have a 5-year-old or if you have a 3-year-old, right? And so again, like the same way that, these people and their lives are dismissed, the film was a little bit dismissed in the beginning, as we were having conversations with people trying to distribute it. Now, again, 10 months into this pandemic, people are like, oh, this is something that actually like affects everybody, because as Nunu said, like there is no economic recovery if we don't figure this out. And all these issues intersect. This is about a living wage, right? This is about subsidized early childhood, quality early childhood education, and creating access, for that. This is about paid leave. This is about healthcare. This is about a social safety net, right? Like, what an idea that you work, you pay taxes, and then you get something back, for the taxes that you pay, which in the US, again, we treat that as like, the kind of the shorthand or the shortcut that, our two-party system takes, is like to say that that's like socialist, or, God forbid, communist. And it's like, no, there's a lot of different kinds of societies that provide a safety net, right? Like, it's not, you
The
know,
taking in
and
care of children and each other being radical is just hysterical to me.
right,
It's such
right,
a
you
sad
know,
reflection of how broken
values, to
and
your point,
values
right?
are when that's
Yeah,
radical. It's like, oh,
it's radical. You're you know, you say it and you're talking, you know, the response is like you're saying something, you know, deeply like radical. And it's like, well, this is why we are where we are, where the United States has the COVID deaths and the COVID cases that it has, because we have no safety net. Zero, you know, absolutely none. That's the result of not having a social safety net, is that we lead. We're one of the leaders in the world of this COVID mess, you know? That's radical to me. The numbers of COVID deaths and COVID cases, that is actually radical to me. And it's unconscionable, you know?
It's unconscionable, and it's a reflection of our lack of, to Lauren's point earlier, like our lack of care about certain people's lives and whose lives actually matter.
Right.
Which has been a recurring, it's the original pandemic. The original pandemic is supremacy racism. So it's like, you know, that's the original pandemic is just being illustrated with coronavirus. We have another audience question wanting to know, is the film going to be, are there any plans for wider distribution for the film so that more people can access it and see it?
Yeah, so right now the film is playing virtually in cinemas across the US and Puerto Rico, and it is available with subtitles in Spanish as well. And it seems like it's going to be continue to play for several more weeks. So definitely encourage folks to watch it that way. As Beth said at the top, you know, it's also a way of supporting local independent cinemas that have been closed, you know, this entire time. And we're also doing we've had like a number of different partnerships with organizations that are working on these issues. We have a fundraiser, you know, that folks can donate to, which goes to support daycare providers that have remained open during the pandemic, but are not getting access to the sort of PPP and the different small business loans that were meant to support small businesses, but then went to huge corporations, you know?
Yeah. Is there a website for that?
Yes, everything is on our website, which is throughthenightfilm.com. You can get all of that information. And also for folks that are asking about solutions and things like that, there are a number of different resources, links to organizations, to ongoing campaigns. There's a lot of work being done on a lot of different fronts because, again, the issues there are many, and they all intersect in this way. And then the film will be on POV on PBS in May, the day after Mother's Day.
Oh, that's perfect. There's another audience question, back to the article that inspired the film. They wanted to know more about where did you see the article, and did it focus on Nunu and Patrick?
It did. It was a magazine. What was the name of the magazine? Do you remember? I don't remember the name of the magazine.
I do remember the journal, and I can't remember the first one, the name of the magazine, but I can definitely text it to you guys and get that to you.
And also, if you look up These Tots, it should come up. If you look up the name of the Patrick's daycare. And it did talk, it was focused on These Tots. So that's, you know, again, where I learned about them specifically.
And the last audience question is specifically about Massachusetts and the essential worker daycares that got set up for it. They want to know if there's even like a little nugget of a potential universal childcare model there.
Yeah, so here in Massachusetts, we've been doing a lot of work to sort of imagine what would a truly equitable and affordable and high quality childcare system look like. And some, you know, interesting stakeholders coming around the table to actually write some policy and legislation, hoping to file it in this legislative session. But to, again, you know, as I mentioned, say, let's build some true infrastructure and let's think about it completely differently. Let's call it a public good and let's fund it that way, not only just to be affordable, but, you know, I'll use this example. we don't fund a firehouse based on how many fire trucks go in and out and in and out and in and out. We fund a firehouse so that it's there when we need it.
Right.
And what we've learned in COVID, right, is that we all need childcare. But what COVID did was crush small businesses. And because we failed to support, right, just the capacity, we've seen so many programs close. I think here in Massachusetts, we're still at about 80% of programs that have reopened, which is good. But that means we've lost 20% of our capacity. Those are childcare slots that are at least still now just gone and may not come back at all. So what, the world is, as I hope it could be, would be that we, and we did some of this through emergency childcare, was rather than kind of rely on this enrollment, right? Nunu and Patrick were saying we lost some families, but we could bring some families back in. It's a really sort of unpredictable, sort of model that we ask childcare providers to operate on. Could we make it that much more stable if we said, and we did this through emergency childcare to some extent, here's an operating grant to cover the fixed costs we know you will have, to make sure that you are there when families need you, even if some of your enrollment cycles a little bit. And that could be a way forward. And so this is some of the thinking that came, right? No, it's like you don't want to see governance by fire, right? But what have we seen in COVID? Oh, it turns out we can do paid leave. We can, right? We did it. Turns out we can give more money to childcare than we have before. So let's keep this going, amp it up, make it permanent. And anything we did in this moment of crisis, when all of a sudden, right, this sort of money rained down from the sky that's never been there before, we've shown it's there. We've shown it can work. And so let's put it to use. And that's, the mission of Neighborhood Villages. So many of the incredible community partners who are part of this, many that Beth mentioned, are themselves childcare and after school providers. Many of them are family childcare connected to these different networks to build something that works for everybody, because it's entirely doable.
And as we close out, I just want to thank everybody for being in conversation with me tonight. And I want Nunu and Loira to have a chance to say what they want people to walk away from both this discussion and this film thinking about.
I want people to walk away from the film and just, first of all, let me say thank you, Loira, because you did a great job for us and just bringing us to the light, because we have been in the darkness so long and just not being cared for. They think they care for us, but they really don't. Thank you for bringing the parents to the light, because my heart goes out to some of them too. I just thank you so much. I definitely want, the legislators and everybody to sit down and say, listen, we need to start working on childcare. We need to start working with these parents, because the end result is that childcare up here is closing and the world is going to come back to normal one day. And we're not going to have places to put children, quality childcare to put children. You're going to be leaving them anywhere. And it's not fair to kids. Kids need love. They need all kind of understanding. They need to learn how to socialize in order for them to blossom and become flowers, And everybody's gonna be closed, the majority of us, because we already are. And I just really wish the legislators and everything was just say, listen, what do you guys need to be prepared for something like this come around again? What do you guys need so we can make sure that everything is going to be okay for the parents and the providers?
I would want to just say right back at you, Nunu, thank you for opening your doors and allowing me and the crew in. I feel like, it's been a tremendous gift to me as a person, everything that I've learned, and just having, you as a friend. It's like a true blessing. And I also feel like it's, your story is a gift to the world. So thank you for sharing and just being so generous. And in terms of what I want people to take away from it, I want to sort of shift and just actually like just been thinking a lot about single mothers right now. You know, what parents and what mothers specifically are being asked to do in this moment is insane. But if you're a single mother, it's really impossible. And so, you know, if there are any single mothers, you know, that watch the Q&A, and you know, folks that are essential workers that are struggling and having a really hard time, I hope that you know that you are struggling not because of any personal fault or failures. You know, you're struggling because we live in a society that is cruel and inhumane. And so if you know, if nothing else, I hope that the film helps you to see that you're not the only one that's in it, and that's going through it. And you know, I hope that whatever guilt, you know, or shame, or whatever you might be feeling, you know, whatever criticism you're facing from people in your life or in your community or your job, you know, that in seeing the film, you can see that it's really, you know, it's this hard because the system is really cruel and violent and inhumane. It's not because you've done anything wrong.
That's right. I want to thank everybody, the audience and everyone on the panel. As far as I'm concerned, Nunu and Patrick's story is a gift to the world. Loira, the way you're using your gift is a gift to the world. And Lauren, the way you're fighting for this is a gift. So thank you all. Good night. That's it.
Thank you, Jeneé. Thank you.
Um,
Love you, Mama.